Okay, good morning, and thank you for coming. And I'm very glad that we were able to conduct a joint international project on power sharing. And we have just had a very intensive week discussing power sharing in ethnically divided community or societies. And first I would like Alison to explain about the project and what can we say, what we found so far.
Sure. So the project looks at citizen inclusion in power sharing settlements, both during the negotiation processes that lead to such arrangements, as well as how they perform over time and the ability to reform them to make sure that they're delivering for citizens. So since 1989, more than 100 peace agreements have mandated some kind of constitutional change, again, to ensure that the different communities that exist in a society are sharing governmental power together. That can sometimes, those arrangements are often elite negotiations, citizens are very far away from them, and our research looks at the opportunities for citizens to be included both before, during, and after such arrangements come into being. And so one of the things we have found is that for such arrangements to exist and persist over time, so many peace agreements fail within 5 years, they need to be grounded in a kind of social contract. So it's not just about ending the war, it's also about building peace. So our research looks at the kinds of opportunities that can help to facilitate the legitimacy of peace agreements in the eyes of those who have to live with them, citizens. So whether that is through deliberative processes like citizens' assemblies, through referendums to support that, or other kinds of elite citizen interactions, including much more precise public opinion surveys, can help to create more robust, more peaceful governance arrangements in divided societies. And so we have looked at that in a number of different cases, those that are working towards agreement like Cyprus, those that are looking to reform like Bosnia-Herzegovina or New Caledonia, places like Lebanon and Cyprus, so lots of different places.
Okay, yeah, I agree that many of the peace agreement primary aim is to end the war.
Right.
And those who will have to live in the post-conflict situation has not much say in this peace agreement process. So we would like to focus on how the citizen can actually participate in this power sharing arrangement. And then I would like to ask Neo, you're from Cyprus, also divided societies, and it's been decades. And similar division are now everywhere. Lebanon, Sudan, Myanmar, and many so-called violent conflict, when they have to terminate it, one way or another, we will have to have kind of a power sharing arrangement. So as a Japanese who lives kind of not physically too far away, but we kind of mentally feel that we are quite far away from all these divisions in the world, and how we Japanese need to know, based on the fact that we see so many divisions in our world, and then division actually deteriorating, so-called international order. So from your point of view, coming from the Cyprus, would you like to have any suggestions for us why we need to know about these difficult divisions in the world?
Cyprus is not atypical to other conflicts in the sense that it has lots of problems and lots of great ideas, a lot of very good people who want to resolve the problem. However, like every other conflict, the local actors by themselves cannot necessarily solve the problem. That's why they need the international community, countries outside, to support them. And here's where Japan is very important, because the fact that it's further away makes it a neutral party who could make contributions. You might recall a few years back when you came to London, you suggested a very interesting proposal where Japan could be one of the external guarantors of the proposal in Cyprus. What the project did which was quite unique, was to take this proposal and test it in public opinion. And we didn't just ask it as a question, as a separate question. It was a part of combination of solutions through a conjoint experiment. Where people saw packages that included forms of power sharing, forms of external guarantees, implementation, compensations, and so on. And what we find there is that the Japanese option is one of the most negotiable from the public opinion perspective, and it could lead to double majorities in a referendum. So we have pre-tested, if you wish, the Japanese contribution from a public opinion perspective. That was important because we didn't just had an idea to discuss with policymakers, but we backed the idea with public opinion data.
So because we are quite away from these ethnic, religious, or geopolitical divisions, so people on the ground see Japanese as a more neutral mediators. So in that sense, I think Japanese needs to understand this division, and probably if we are useful, maybe we can contribute. And I think this is quite important. Nowadays, many, I think, medias as well as an expert or opinion leaders saying that the daunting world, and the younger generation feel that, you know, we are so much depressed and nothing like positive in terms of the creating peaceful society and the role of Japan in such a bright future. We don't have much discussions. The militaries are talking about expanding military budget and trying to match up with the Chinese build-up, and so it's very, I think, negative impressions and practice continues. So I would like to kind of encourage to government and citizens of Japan to think how we can positively contribute so that we have a bright future, a positive future. And then I would like to talk about how specifically Japan can contribute to the Cyprus. And particularly I would like to focus that in many cases UN and other actors tries to mediate, and I would say UN is one of the most neutral international organization in the world. And why UN failed, but you believe that the Japan, EU or Canada, Australia, Japan effort will have a chance of successfully completing the peace agreement.
I think there's a couple of things, and maybe Neo can speak to this a little bit more, but we are sort of living in a changing international environment, right? Like different mediation actors are coming forward, different kinds of conflicts, as you say. We're seeing a lot more sort of focus on military budgets and other kinds of issues, and those kinds of peace processes can sometimes, because they're slow going processes with many moving parts, can sometimes fall off of the agenda. And when an organization like the United Nations sort of gets bogged down in sort of, bigger sort of geopolitical rivalries, that creates a kind of opening for states like Japan or Canada or the European Union or other kinds of organizations to be filling those kinds of peace building, peace support, mediation roles, right? So you can see where it would be vitally important when you've got those kinds of blockages in larger international organizations for that kind of more ad hoc approach from states to be important.
Now, can you explain that based on the survey you did with the Cypriot people, how do they see Japan compared to the UN or others? Or how do they see that the Japanese collaboration with EU or UK?
All the proposals, the way they tested, included the United Nations. We're not aiming to replace the UN as an actor. However, the implementing partners could be in three different combinations. NATO, EU countries, and 3 non-EU countries were still allies of the European Union and key commercial partners such as Canada, Australia, and Japan, all in combination with each other. So we have 3 possibilities, and those we have shown are more acceptable as a combination to Greek and Turkish Cypriots compared to the traditional guarantors, Greece and Turkey. So that's the first element. NATO could be also included, or EU countries. However, the issue there is that the EU is not trusted by Turkey. So from the point of elite negotiations, that's not as implementable, as adoptable. From the point of the Greek Cypriot, the largest political party who supports reunification is a communist party who is also against the NATO inclusion. So Japan, Australia and Canada are left as the most negotiable option from the point of view of elite negotiations. That's where we still get the support of the public, but it's more likely to get the support of the leaders as well. And again, the way I call this is the reverse Okinawa model, meaning that if you have a strong strategic interest in cooperation with European countries and the UK, who is a sovereign basis in the island, then you contribute to the security of your strategic partners. This could open up collaboration on issues of trade, Japan, EU, and the UK, and also defense contracts. So the issues here are not just ethical and moral, supporting peace agreements elsewhere in the world, which can highlight Japan's potential and also contribute to its own strategic goal of becoming a UN permanent Security Council member, but also it has immediate benefits in terms of defense, strategy, and commerce.
Yeah, right now, I think people are discussing, now Trump's administration, we may not be able to fully depend on the U.S. for the security guarantor. And I think Japanese government is trying to seek alternatives, working with Australia, India, and also with Europe. And I would say, at the moment, Japanese people's eyes are focused on Ukraine-Russian war. On the other hand, that war is a quite complicated and then probably difficult one. On the other hand, in the case of Cyprus, I can underline that absence of war continues for many years. So for Japanese to step in, it is less difficult for Japanese public to allow, I think, our involvement in the peace process. So in that sense, I think we can recommend our government to play a major role in this endeavor. But probably we need to have more concrete ideas on what kind of a role Japanese government or the people can play in the peace process. And then probably when we were to work with Canada or Australia, and what kind of a collaboration can we propose? Neil, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. The project is funded by Japan, Canada, the UK, and France. So there is an interest among colleagues across the project to promote this idea. One of the leading think tanks in Canada is a member of the consortium, the Forum of Federations, have done a great amount of work as a university, Brandon University and Queen's University, Canada, who also participate in the project. So we can promote ideas such as this. In addition, this is not either or. Japan and Canada could be involved in peacekeeping in Ukraine if we get a peace settlement. We're also looking at the cases of Bosnia and Kosovo as part of the broader European security. But the advantage of starting with Cyprus is that Cyprus is low risk, and peacekeeping forces could also receive significant training in Cyprus at a low risk environment. So in terms of the sequence, it might be better to start from there and prepare the grounds for more difficult and demanding peace operations in the future.
Actually, before the Syrian civil war broke out, we have sent our troops to Golan Heights.
Right.
And we call it the peacekeeping school,
Right.
so that the Japanese soldiers can go there and practice and learn what to be like the international operations. But since the Syrian civil war, we withdrew from there, and we kind of don't have a kind of stable environment where we can send our peacekeepers. And the Japanese government, I think, now rethinking that they're no longer interested in involving in international operation because national defense demand is so high, and they say we don't have the luxury of sending our troops abroad. But on the other hand, I would say it is a quite unfortunate loss that we have been contributing to peacekeeping for many years, and a lot of accumulation of expertise and knowledge. And then when I meet with soldiers who have joined these international operations, they feel that they can actually test how good they are. They do practice with Americans, but that's the only reference. But they compare with Canadian, Indian, Rwandan, and when they interact with these other soldiers, they need to appreciate what kind of training they have done, and it's created them as a very disciplined mediators. And that kind of, I think, practice needs to continue, and I would think that Cyprus can be one of the good first staging ground for Japanese to contribute. And another thing I kind of wanted to say is when there is a self-defense forces, media will follow. And then Japanese government cannot fail in this kind of environment. So I would hope, not just sending troops, but I would like our government to play a major role in a more peace process. Not necessarily just coming up with the power sharing arrangement, but also how to get involved ordinary citizen and reconstruction and so on and so forth.
So I think one of the important things to keep in mind too about peace processes is that there's many different moving parts, right? So there is the peacekeeping side and need to have troops on the ground. There's also the need to, mediate those kinds of negotiations where you're deciding on different institutions for the new government after the fact. And so there's security provisions, there's political provisions, there's economic reconstruction. So there's all these different moving parts. And something like our project that looks at those post-conflict political institutions, it can be highly technical. So there's a role here for bridging that academic policy gap, because the kinds of things that we're doing looks at the kinds of ways that different institutions might work together, which when you're in that sort of hothouse environment of negotiations, that kind of technical knowledge is really important and needs to be at the table. So there's a role for to have that kind of training, education piece on the kinds of choices that are available, which, in interactions between universities, researchers, and governments can begin to offer those kinds of training opportunities on sort of, political, constitutional, institutional design. So the kinds of work that the team at Waseda and at Hiroshima universities are doing on thinking about the kinds of ways that different groups can support or inform what kinds of institutional choices get adopted, can help to create much more durable arrangements. So that kind of ability to have an education training piece is really important.
One of the deliverables of the project that we discussed the last few days with the Forum of Federations in Ottawa is the development of an inclusive peace toolkit, a training course that would also include peacekeeping forces. So as you mentioned before, having a school where a Japanese soldier will come to a place like Cyprus or Bosnia and receive the type of training that will make him or her a better citizen and a better soldier when they return back to Japan. So the proposal is not at the expense of Japan's security and economy. In fact, there are tangible, immediate benefits. So training, energy cooperation, natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean is an important variable here because it can be exported to Asian markets as well as secure Europe's energy security. Also defense contracts, which are very important. EU now is announcing almost $1 billion in terms of its rearmament. It's only a small portion of what the entire European economies will contribute. So the the prospect of cooperation there for Japanese companies is enormous. Plus, you have at least one Japanese bank who's about to make an entry in the Cypriot economy. So there are immediate benefits for Japan to be involved, as well as for countries like Australia and Canada who have large Cypriot diasporas.
I think, speaking of the merit for Japan, I think it will be a great opportunity to expand EU, Japan, UK, Japan relationship. On top of that, Turkey and Japan has had a very good relationship. But probably it could be a first very close cooperation with Turkey, and that is, I think, important things. And we also heavily dependent on the oils from the Middle East, and security and stability in the area is very important. But it is probably very difficult to have our troops on the Middle East, but Cyprus is close enough, and then probably it will be a great strategic praise for Japan in terms of like evacuation of the Japanese national from the Middle East, and it will be the first staging ground to collect the Japanese national there. So there's a lot of merit in contributing the stability and peace in Cyprus.
Yeah, I think it's a reminder that there are normative, political, economic, and strategic reasons to support peace processes, right? That can be difficult. It can be a long process, but there's lots of important dividends to supporting that creation of durable arrangements.
So we talked about a lot of government, international organizations, and maybe academia or researchers. Do you have any say on how citizens, both from the perspective of the citizens who have to live in the post-peace agreement, and then citizens like Canada, Japan, or the UK?
Citizen public opinion is extremely important to be incorporated in any peace agreements. In fact, our contribution as a project is much broader. And the idea behind public opinion surveys is that we can look at different institutional options that are more adaptable and adoptable in the peace context. But also we can see how the international community is understood from a public opinion perspective, and what aspects and actors in the international community could make a difference. So we have run a similar survey in Bosnia, where we look at different options of mediators and which countries could mediate in the revised Dayton Agreement, how they will do so, to what kind of mediation formula they should be using. Should they arbitrate? Should they facilitate? Should they propose themselves solutions? These are the type of questions we're testing in our work. We're trying to bridge the citizen level with an international level in our analysis, and that creates this is part of the inclusive peace matrix, if you wish, to create the methodologies that could help mediation support units in the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the peace building department, or the UN mediation support unit, to come up with the best solutions and to match the right international players with the appropriate conflict settings.
But a little bit away from how the citizens do, but one thing I also wanted to highlight is that there is no mediation support unit in Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Something equivalent UK have and Canada have, but we don't. And probably that is one thing that we can contribute. And our government has been, for the past almost 22 decades, helping young Japanese to be trained and then to work for the peace building and many UN occasions. And we have more than 300 graduates. But so far we have been focusing primarily on how to be effective in humanitarian assistance, or maybe post-conflict reconstruction, refugee support, but not necessarily focusing on mediation. So like one of our contribution would be we can focus on these mediations. And myself has worked as a kind of a mediator with facilitating the Filipino peace process, and I feel that you need to have a lot of experience actually mediating this tense situation. So I don't know how that can relate to the civilian, but one thing our project can fill in is focusing on mediation and Japan's role. And maybe I'd like to hear your view.
Yeah, so obviously, yes, a mediation support unit is an excellent idea in terms of, again, the different ways that the sort of, political knowledge that Japan has that can be brought to bear on peace processes, having, informed processes in the Philippines and elsewhere, and just thinking about the different ways that, again, all of these different connections between mediation support, ties into post-conflict reconstruction and humanitarian assistance, but sort of building up that capacity here to be able to respond to conflicts as they come up would be really important.
And just to link it back to the question of Cyprus, Cyprus also has a very strong Mediterranean women's mediators movement, plus a number of other feminist organizations who work on the ground. So this is a type of inclusive peace mediation that incorporates broader elements and actors in the peace agreement, and this is something that engagement of external actors could benefit from, learning from the local actors, inclusion of the youth, inclusion of feminist voices in the negotiations. There's been a number of think tanks that operate in EU conflicts, Scandinavian, Canadian. So these cross-learning across cases could benefit also mediation support units and efforts in Japan.
And indeed, that's one of the central objectives of that project, is to bring that comparative knowledge from, again, a wide variety of cases from around the world, to begin to think about, what are the kinds of arrangements that are adoptable, what are the kinds of institutions that can be adapted or reformed to keep them going, to keep parties talking to each other, to support, those sort of the reestablishment of good community relations and that kind of thing. So I think, again, a project like ours brings together all of this, global kind of snapshot of the kinds of things that can help support durable agreements. And one thing, again, is that the citizens need to see those arrangements as legitimate, right? And so those opportunities to influence, again, whether it's the adoption or the function or the adaptation of those agreements, it's really important. So again, trying to close that gap between elites and citizens is really important.
Okay. I have been involved in Japanese government efforts to train peace builders, and majority of the applicants actually female. And there's so many talented the women who wish to work in the field of peace building. So one thing that we can advocate is to create a role for those females who wish to contribute in the mediation, as well as the youth. I think we are very much, as a university, we also encourage the training or the educational project, and to make our students more familiar with the international, the multicultural environment, and also we wish to produce youngsters who are contributing world peace.
Right. And that's where things like the UN's Women, Peace and Security agenda, there's an emerging youth peace and security agenda, again, that speaks to the vital importance of the inclusion of those voices in the processes that lead to peace, right? That there's lots of evidence that they are more sustainable, they are more robust, they last longer when they're inclusive. And so again, our project is looking at what are the different ways for that inclusion to happen, right? And there's lots of different ways from, again, deliberative forums or specially appointed positions in mediation groups or that kind of thing that can facilitate that kind of inclusion as peace is being mediated.
So one of the deliverables of the project was development of the winter school in Cyprus, which was a week-long training for youth leaders in the Eastern Mediterranean. That included not only Cypriot students, but also students youth from everywhere in the Eastern Mediterranean, including Middle Eastern conflicts. This could be expanded in the future to include Canadian and Japanese students, so there will be benefits for the universities and the students in these countries who are funding the project, the UK as well and France. So from an academic point of view, this contributes to the development of graduate programs in peace and conflict studies, but also the training of the next generation of peacekeepers and mediators.
Yeah, and one of the best things about our project, of course, is that we've been able to bring in those student perspectives, whether through research assistants or fellowships or that kind of thing, but to have students be involved in the research has been really a great sort of piece to it, to have those youth perspectives around the table as well. So, and again, as you say, to sort of build up that critical mass of expertise that is needed to support peace processes.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. And our project is called Inclusive Peace, so that's what we talked about. Inclusivity is a buzzword and can be promoted but also face a lot of criticism. Okay, be realistic. So we have to seek a balance between pragmatic approaches but also inclusions, and then what kind of inclusions, you just put people here or just really listen to their voices. So I hope our project will contribute to making a peace process more inclusive and sustainable. Thank you very much today for sharing your views.
What is the most concern about the situation of world divided now?
Well, so there's two things. I think one is we are living in an international moment where we're seeing the resurgence of interstate war, but there's still lots of conflicts that are happening internally, where you need to find the kinds of arrangements where people can live together after conflict, and that's where things like power sharing arrangements come in. So they're really important for facilitating peace, particularly in those kinds of civil wars or other kinds of internal conflicts. And those are the kinds of things we're looking at. What are the kinds of ways in which you can support peace between different communities living together after conflict?
What is the role of citizenship?
Right, so for any agreement to be durable, for it to be seen as legitimate, to support democratization and peace, it has to resonate with citizens. And so citizens can contribute both to giving indication as to the kinds of arrangements that they're prepared to live with, the kinds of strategies that can help make peace possible. So they can do that at the front end, again, throughout the deliberative processes, public consultation mechanisms, public opinion surveys, voting, and then having referendums once you have an agreement to ensure that citizens support what has been agreed. Again, often these are negotiations that happen behind closed doors, but there are ways to integrate those perspectives more fully, again, to ensure that they're inclusive, that they are durable, and can build towards a brighter future.
Yeah, I think so. Who is the international community?
So that's a big question, and sometimes the answer is evolving. So there are different ways to think about the kinds of international organizations that we have built, like the United Nations, like the European Union, the African Union, other kinds of ways for states to come together in those forums. Sometimes it's leading states. Again, we're seeing sort of some shifts on that front too. But trying to think of ways that states, non-governmental organizations, citizens, international organizations can begin to facilitate some kind of cooperation in terms of peace support in a variety of places around the world. So there's a lot of different ways we can think about who the international community is, but again, at the end of it, it's thinking about the ways in which the people can inform public opinion.
In divided societies, there are often strong voices in favor of peace. However, it's not sufficient. Divided societies might not be in a position to resolve issues by themselves. So the most important concern is the presence or absence, in most cases the absence, of external third parties who could help actors come together and negotiate, implement, and adjust a peace agreement.
Yeah, what is the role of citizen for care the division?
Citizens could contribute in different ways through peace movements that can act as a buffer between warring parties. This could be at the level of the youth, at the level of civil society, at the level of women coalitions, at the level of local mediators, municipalities who can help bridge together the differences. So citizens can act as barriers to division and barriers to conflict. They can organize themselves in groups, in NGOs, in political parties who could support peace agreements. Citizens' assembly is something that we have studied extensively in our project. Referendum campaigns are also important elements here because in some cases they are necessary steps according to constitutions. So all these are ways of bringing citizens into the peace agreements and making the peace agreements not only implementable but also legitimate from the public point of view.
Thank you very much. And last question, who is the international community? What is the subject?
That's the most important question, and I think it's an existential one. In the past few decades, we experienced technological advancement, development of technologies that could bring the end of the planet and the end of humanity. But at the same time, we haven't seen the equal level of development at the level of international community in terms of norms, in terms of practices that will ensure that the technology we developed will not lead to our destruction. So in a way, we have seen even a reverse or a backsliding in international norms. The international community does not seem to be there to support the major priorities in terms of what the UN would like to see, the peace agenda, development agenda as well. In particular, in the Western world, we see that the EU is preoccupied with the war in Ukraine. The US is facing its own problems as well. That leaves only a limited number of actors to play this critical role in peace mediations in divided societies. And here's where we saw the potential of countries in our projects, such as Japan, Canada, also countries such as Australia, France, United Kingdom, who are supporting our project to play a very important role in divided societies in a number of cases that were involved as well with public opinion polls.
改めて今世界で起きている分断にまさに実効性のあるそのインクルーションなアクションというのは一体何だというふうに改めて考えていますか？
そうですね、多分例えば今のウクライナとロシアの戦闘の停戦とか、あるいは停戦を踏まえたその後の和平とか、プーチンはどうかとか、ゼレンスキーはどうかとか、やっぱりもちろんトップレベルの決断っていうのが最も重要になるかもしれませんけれども、そういうような提案がなされた中で一般のウクライナの人々はどういうふうに感じるのかとか、あるいはロシアの人たちはどう感じるのかっていうのを、たとえ権威主義的な国であったとしてもやっぱり人々の感覚っていうのを大切にしていかなくてはいけないと。でそのために、我々アカデミックとして何ができるのかって考えた時にいろいろなリサーチを使って人々がどういうふうに考えるのか。今まで停戦、この領土割譲はいいですか、良くないですかっていうような一つ一つの質問で人々の意見を聞いていくっていうよりは、やっぱ和平合意ってパッケージになると思うので、例えば領土に関してはこうです、安全の保障に関してはこうです、国際社会の関与の仕方に関してはこうです、いくつかのいろいろな要素を含めた形で、パッケージとしてパッケージ A、B、C、D とかっていうふうに聞いていくことによって、人々の本当のどういうものだったら 受け入れられる受け入れられないっていうのが分かってくるんだと思うんですね。それを踏まえた上でまず、政策決定者の方たちが決断をする。でその決断をするための重要な要素として彼らの思いあるいは彼らエリートが感じる必要なものだけではなくて一般市民の声というのも取り入れる、そこに私たちのリサーチの、最も重要な、何ですかね、存在理由というのがあるのかなと思います。
市民社会はどう動くべきか。
で市民社会に関してですけれども、私たちの考えでは意思決定の中でいろいろと市民社会が動く余地はあって、メディアと市民社会の協力とか、大学とメディアと市民社会の協力、いろんな形があると思うんですけども、人々のパセプションというんですかね、事態をどう受け取っているのか、危機感はどう抱いているのか、どれを可能性があると思っているのか、いろんな人々の考えに影響を与えるのはやっぱり我々市民の声もあると思うんですね。もちろんメディアの力っていうのは大きいと思いますし、 SNS の力も大きいと思うので、多様になったからこそ、我々市民が、声を上げ、何がいいのか何が良くないのか、どうした方がいいんじゃないかっていうのを、議論できる場、議論を作ることによって市民が平和に貢献できると思います。でもちろんこれ一個の案っていうのをまとめる必要は必ずしもないかもしれないんですけど、こういう案もあるんじゃないか、こういう案もあるんじゃないか、これ若者の視点からだとこういうことやってほしいとか、女性の視点からだとこうやってほしいとか、あるいは紛争によって土地を奪われた人の視点からだったらこうがいいとか、さまざまな意見を組み上げていって世論っていうのを作っていくのは重要だと思いますし、特に民主主義の国家では世論がどう動くのか、どう感じるのかが政策決定者の決定に大きく作用しますし、私はあまり権威主義体制の国のことを知らないですけども、中国であってもロシアであってもやっぱり世論というものには完全には逆らえないんじゃないか。世論を作っていくのは市民社会の重要な役割だと思います。シチズンって言った時に誰を指すのかで、結構紛争地も歩いてきたんですけども、やっぱり我々にコンタクトを取ってくれるような人っていうのはシチズンの中でもかなり意識が高いとか、英語が喋れるとか、かなり社会の中で上の方の人たちで、大多数の人たちの意見ってなかなか汲み取れないんですね。でやっぱり今日のインタビューを受けていて思ったことは、そういう人たちの声を汲み取る役割のある中間に入れるような人、橋渡しができるような人っていうのが必要なんじゃないかなと思いました。それでやっぱり日々の生活が苦しい人は和平のプロジェクトがどうのこうのというよりも、自分の仕事が確保できるかとか、家族を養えるかってことにやっぱり関心が向くのは仕方がないと思いますし、今の学生も含めて就活の方が重要で、ウクライナの平和とかガザの平和に考えるよりはそっちのことに関心がいってしまうのは仕方がないとは思うんですけども、我々のような立場にあるものがいかにそういう、日々の暮らしで精一杯の人たちの声を汲み取って聞き取ってで、取り継いでいくのか伝えていくのかっていうのが重要なのかなと思いました。で国際社会って何ですかって堀さんに問いかけられて、イメージしてくるものは国連とか NATO とか、グローバルサウスとか、あるいは G7 とかなんだけど、我々一人もやっぱり国際社会の一員であって、それを切り離してしまってはいけないのかなと、理想的主義的な言葉に聞こえるかもしれないけれども、本来であれば我々も国際社会なんです。